Enter the 90s, the twilight era of the American shopping mall. A stolen device sparks an unassuming suburban saga of stealth, subterfuge, and revenge. Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob, and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today, I have two stories for you from the ProRevenge subreddit. Let's jump right in. This story comes to us from the Cardinal74. You stole from my girl? I won't be petty with my revenge. This took place in the late 90s, when cell phones still charged calls by the minute, so the use of pagers was still pretty common. My girlfriend at the time had a pager, and she would keep it clipped to her sun visor in her car when driving. So if it went off, she could glance at it to see who was sending the page without really taking eyes off the road, and see if it's worth pulling over. Being early summer and we were about 21, life was all about social time those days. At this time, well before the internet took hold, the popular hangout was the shopping mall. 200 stores, something for everyone, and it's where the masses of teenagers would spend their free time. Largest mall in the region, so always a chance to meet new people or find people you hadn't seen in a while. So as she pulled in on a Friday night to meet up with her friends, she saw an old friend from her neighborhood, someone she hadn't seen since middle school years. He went down the pothead route, she didn't. They drifted but had no hard feelings. So she stopped next to him, chatted for a few minutes, exchanged pleasantries, then moved on to find a parking spot. It was there, as she went to get out of the car, that she noticed the pager was missing. She instantly remembered he had leaned in to rest his arms on the window frame to chat, and remembered when he asked her about something that prompted her to reach for her glove box, and he must have swiped it then. Feeling stupid and knowing who took it wasn't hard to figure out, but good luck finding him again amongst the crowds. She went home and tried to deal with it herself. She knew where he lived, as during the conversation, he had mentioned he was staying with so-and-so, and she knew where that guy lived. She borrowed her older brother's cell phone, called me, and told me where she was going, gave me the address. I headed there. So she went to the townhouse complex, parked right outside their unit, walked up and rang the doorbell. She talked to the mutual friend's mother, explained what happened. Lady seemed annoyed at the kid, said he was a deadbeat, and agreed to help. She paged her son, he called back, and she said they were on their way home right now. So she sat outside and waited. 15 minutes, 30 minutes, I show up and park far away, but within a line of sight. I wanted to back her up in case things went effy, but if she wanted to handle this the nice way, I'll let her do that first. I think she thought she would confront him, he'd say something like it was worth a try and hand it back. An hour. By now, it was getting late. Was after 12 midnight. We waited until 12:30 when she calls me and says she needs to get some sleep. Let's just write it off. But I had a feeling, so I told her to leave, to pull out of the complex, circle around, and then pull back into the complex and park over where I was parked, then turn off her car. She does, then comes join me in my car, and we have a bit of a stakeout. Sure enough, my suspicions were confirmed when not 5 minutes later, the guys arrive. Her mother told them she was waiting, then told them once she left, and it was clear to come home. I asked her if that was the butthole's car or the friend's. We saw them get out and realized it was the butthole's car. My plan quickly fell into shape. I told her to go home, get some sleep, I'll take care of this. See, the car stood out. It was a beater car. It was blue with a silver back fender and back passenger door, replaced from an accident but never painted to match. It was heavily tinted, which is illegal but not really enforced unless police wanted a reason to pull you over. It had a loud system. Every square foot had a dent or a ding. There was a crappy add-on spoiler that was 3 sizes too large, and there were Jamaican flag bumper stickers on it even though he was white as snow. And he had these obnoxiously bright neon license plate frames. You know the type. Instead of buying a decent car, waste tons of money blinging out a piece of crap that constantly breaks down. So I sit and I wait. 1 a.m., 2 a.m. rolls around. Most house lights in the area have gone out by now, including theirs. Not quite time. 3 a.m. rolls around. 3:30, almost. 3:45. There was not a lick of movement anywhere. Now's the time. I get out of my car, hunch down just in case, and slowly work my way to his car, pull out my screwdriver, and quietly remove both the back and the front license plates, replace the frames, head back to my car, and drive home. You see, the way the parking lot was, walking out of his front door, you were looking at the driver's side of his car, not the front or the back. And who, honestly, looks to see if there are license plates on their car when you go to get in? So it's now late Saturday afternoon, and a posse shows up at my girlfriend's house, including a very large woman threatening to beat the crap out of her. She played it cool, said she had no idea what they were talking about. They screamed that she stole his license plates because he had stolen her pager, and he even took out the pager and smashed it on the sidewalk as some sort of revenge. She laughed and said, "I honestly have no idea what you're talking about. I don't really care about the pager. We already had the account moved to a new pager. That was an old and ugly one anyway. Yeah, I came by to ask for it back, but it got late, so I just got a different one. I don't care enough to make an issue out of it." They continued to scream at her. Apparently, he went out, the cops pulled him over for not having plates on his car, and he had to go to the police station and file a police theft report in order to get out of a ticket. She just repeated, "I had nothing to do with that, so unless you have proof, you're about to be seeing the police again." They knew they had nothing, grumbled, and weren't sure how to react, so they gave a few more empty threats and left. I let it sit. I gave it about 6 to 7 weeks, nothing more came of it, and everyone but me apparently moved on with our lives. I guess they thought that was the end of it. But I saw that visit and those threats as an escalation, so I reacted in kind. Late summer, I again went back to his place. Again, I found the car. It was really easy to spot. And again, I waited until about 3:45 a.m., and again, I stole his new license plates. Only this time, I put his original plates back on. And because the non-repaired side of the back of his car left a gaping hole in the wheel well, I was able to get my arm up in there and pop out the bulb socket for his left blinker. Then I went on my way. So even if he did get into the habit of making sure there were plates on the car, there were, and unless he was paying attention, the numbers would seem natural because he had them for years. But I'm not sure he even looked. If the internet was a thing back then, heck, if scanners were a popular thing back then, I would still have the hard evidence, which to this day I'd probably use as my phone's lock screen picture. A little blurb in the local paper a few days later, a blurb that was proudly cut out and shared amongst friends, but sadly lost to the ages in 25 plus years and countless apartments and house moves since then. A little blurb in the police blotter section about the arrest of a particular young man who was pulled over for a malfunctioning blinker on a car that was operating on stolen plates. He was charged with fraudulently filing a false police report, claiming plates clearly in his possession were stolen, defrauding the Motor Vehicle Commission, a crime in this state, for fraudulently obtaining new plates, possession of controlled substances, and possession of drug paraphernalia, along with a host of traffic violations for having tinted windows, failure to maintain a vehicle, and a few other tickets. He was remanded pending bail and issued a court date. Never found out if he posted bail. I'm sure his friend's mother didn't, and he had already been on the outs with his own family. It was a good 5 months later when we were at the mall again, and she sees the large woman and a couple of the other people that came to her house that day walking towards us. We all noticed each other at the same time. I felt my girlfriend tense up a little bit, but without a word, those three just paused a second, turned, and went in a different direction. Never saw or heard from any of them ever again. I guess my message was received loud and clear. I absolutely love this revenge story because OP did such a little act, removing license plates from a car, but it dealt huge consequences to the driver of that car, the prick who had stolen from his girlfriend. OP couldn't have known that there would be any kind of paraphernalia in that car, so that was just a bonus, on top of them getting pulled over for the plate issue in the first place. I'm definitely going to have to remember this one if anybody pisses me off in the future, because it's such an easy process to remove a plate from a car. But these days, you really gotta watch out for cameras, because they're on a lot of houses. Now, I'm not condoning this. That's my legal message. I am not condoning this. But wow, this one worked really well. This story comes to us from Reddit admin Dumb87. I'll come back so long as Larry isn't there. Background. To give you some background on my friend Tim, made up name, he has been programming since he was like 7 years old. Tim said by the time he got to college, he breezed through most of his comp sci classes, because a lot of the content they were covering, he had already mastered years prior. Tim is an excellent programmer. Tim's career has been quite successful. He's worked for Google, Facebook, Amazon, and finally a hedge fund. The story starts at the hedge fund. Tim works a lot with AI technology, and at this hedge fund, he was the lead programmer manager who spearheaded an effort to optimize their AI that helped them complete literally millions of trades a day. To say his work had a massive impact was an understatement. All of this is going on with COVID-19 in the background. Due to COVID-19, they went to a work-from-home model, where my friend Tim kept working. During the work from home, Tim was looking around his fancy $4,500 a month New York City apartment and wished for things like a yard, a heated pool, a nice 3-car garage, and not living in a high-rise. It dawned on Tim that he could leave New York City. Tim moves to Michigan. So Tim moved back to his hometown in Michigan, where he bought himself a really nice home with a heated pool, a 3-car garage, a nice yard, and guess what the yard had in it? A mother-in-law suite, which was essentially a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, second home on the property of his main home, which he turned into his man cave. It's actually pretty sick. Oh yeah, and his mortgage payment was far less than his $4,500 a month rent, like half. Tim spent the rest of his COVID-19 working from home, pounding out projects, etc. He never actually informed his employer on an official basis he moved. He just kept working. Then COVID-19 ended. COVID-19 is finally over, back to the office, or... Tim's boss, Larry, calls him up and goes, "All right, Tim, on Monday, we're starting work back at the office." And Tim goes, "Yeah, about that. I moved to Michigan." Larry is shocked and goes, "You didn't even ask if you could do that?" And Tim basically said, "I didn't know I needed your permission to move," in a sarcastic as F way. Larry insists that Tim needs to move back to New York City or he won't have a place on the team. Tim says he's been doing the exact same work from home at a high level for the past year. He's willing to travel to New York City for a few meetings a year on his own dime, but he feels his quality of life is so much higher outside of New York City. He has no desire to live in New York City. To which Larry said if Tim doesn't have any desire to live in New York City, then he has no desire to keep Tim employed. Now, dear Reddit, what do you think a talented senior programmer with over a decade of experience who specializes in AI technology is going to say to a response like that? If you're thinking he quit, you'd be absolutely right. He quit. Maintaining complex code can be hard. Now, anyone that has done any programming knows that sometimes the best person to maintain the code is the person who wrote the code. There's logic, there's thought processes, there's so much that goes into programming that can be so individualistic, it can be hard for someone to take over a code base they didn't write. John, CEO, enters the picture. 6 weeks go by when John calls Tim. John is the CEO of the hedge fund. John gets Tim to agree to consider coming back. So that's when John suggests they fly Tim to New York City and he sits down with John. Tim, however, flipped the switch and said, "No, how about you fly out to Michigan and we discuss this?" Tim said he said that because he wanted to establish if he was going to come back, it was going to be him working from Michigan. And if he was going to talk his employment, it was going to be done in Michigan. John agreed and 2 days later flew out to meet with Tim. Tim sits down and John says they really need him because he provided a lot of value to the organization and the programming team is struggling. John offers Tim the opportunity to come back with a 20% pay cut since he won't be living in New York City. and John called that a cost of living adjustment. To which Tim said, "No, I want a 15% raise above what I was earning." John sits back and responds, "The reason we pay you what we pay is because we ask you to live in New York City, and we understand that's an expensive city to live in." To which Tim says, "You pay what you pay, and you pay it because I am worth it. If I wasn't worth what you pay, you wouldn't be paying me. Now, my first condition is, if you want me back, it'll be a 15% raise." John goes, "And second?" "The second condition is, I'll come back so long as Larry isn't there." John sighs, "You're asking for too much." To which Tim goes, "You don't need to bring me back if you don't want to. I'll be fine elsewhere." John goes, "I'll talk to the partners." Tim says, "My offer is good till Friday." John goes, "What do you mean?" Tim says, "Next Monday is when I'm going to start looking for work. This offer is good until Friday." It was Tuesday. John leaves. That Thursday, the phone rings. It's John. In conclusion, "Tim, we are transferring Larry to a different fund. He won't be working with you anymore, and we are fine with giving you a 15% raise. Can we send you an offer letter for you to sign?" Tim said, "Of course. And Larry is really gone?" John goes, "Yes, you will never need to interact with Larry ever again." That was at the start of this year. Tim hasn't been in New York City, hasn't heard from Larry, hasn't seen Larry on any communications, etc. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called BuffyBot232. It says, "Wouldn't Tim have to file a new W-4 with his employer for his new residence for tax purposes? Also, most companies I know have a work from home policy and a return to work policy due to COVID. Larry was just doing his job as a manager, upholding the company's policy. Because imagine if every single employee did what Tim did. Asking the CEO to come to him sounds like a power trip move. Tim was able to get what he wanted because his skill set is in high demand. But he sounds like a dick. A rightfully entitled dick, but a dick nonetheless." Yeah, I can see where Tim was in the wrong here, not informing his employer that he had moved to a completely different state. Now, albeit it wasn't one that far away, but the employer was expecting him to be in New York City and he wasn't anymore. So that's kinda on him. Gotta be honest, if I was the employer in that case and one of my employees moved and didn't tell me, well, I probably would have some trust issues with that employee going forward. I guess OP's just really lucky that they had skills that were in really high demand and they were able to be an entitled dick to get what they wanted. So, good on you, OP. Check out both OPs linked in the description down below. I thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.